Next up, we have Calgary emergency physician Dr. Joe Vipond, and I should also mention he's a co-chair of the Climate Hub and a good friend. Go for it, Joe.
I'm muting myself. Hey, Mark. Thanks for joining us. I hope you found this fun. From a Calgary perspective, it's really great to have somebody who has such a good climate brain on their shoulders speak to us. So I guess going back to the carbon pricing, because I know you've been a carbon pricing pessimist for many years, and I think you've just mentioned that it hasn't worked politically for Alberta. But it seems to be working politically for federally. I know we're always just one election away from losing it if the Conservatives get into power. But yet the last election climate seemed to be very high up on the agenda, and with over 60% of Canadians supporting a party that supports carbon pricing, it almost feels like federally that battle is won. Do you have any changes in your opinion on carbon pricing in view of that, the politics of today, or are you still concerned that it's a politically inefficient way of getting things done?
Yeah, so I'm not convinced either way. I actually push back when my economist colleagues tell politicians that carbon pricing is essential. And it's not. So I think it's important to be honest about that. And I know you're not saying that, but I've run into that. We had this thing called the Eco-Fiscal Commission in Canada for 5 years, and they were singular policy. And I was trying to say, that's not even what's the driving policy in Scandinavia. Are you hearing me all right?
Mm-hmm.
Joe?
Yeah.
Oh, you're hearing me all right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Sorry, you just had a look on your face that made me nervous.
I was just going to ask a follow-up, so I was typing a little note saying I was going to ask a follow-up, but I'll wait for you to finish.
Okay, and then yes, cut back in. And so what the point I'm getting is, what is your driving policy? So when you say to me, it looks like carbon pricing has succeeded now federally, and I would argue carbon pricing has survived federally as a marginal policy. So when I and my modelers model the federal policies and take out the carbon pricing, it's not, the emission reductions that are driven by federal policies happen anyway, or almost all of them happen. And they happen for the reasons I was saying. It's because of these regulations. I mean, the big one is to phase out the coal plants. Oh my goodness. And then the second thing is, and this has been an issue for a while. So even when Stéphane Dion lost the federal election on carbon pricing, so 2008, I think it was, so 12 years ago. So I've advised governments for a long time. I cross paths a fair bit with people who do surveys for political purposes. And what they're not interested in whether 60% of Canadians or 50% of Canadians support carbon pricing. They're interested in 2 to 3% of Canadians in the key swing ridings who might be willing to vote single issue. So a lot of people do vote single issue. Like they'll say, I don't like car insurance, I'm going to vote against this government. Or I don't like the carbon tax, it's punitive of me. I live in the 905, the suburban area of Toronto. I've got to drive the kids to soccer and so on. The Conservatives have promised me if they win this election, they'll get rid of that carbon tax and they'll still achieve the climate objectives. And so all I'm saying is, I would not come to the conclusion that you tentatively seem to present, which is that the battle's won federally. And I think you would know if it was won federally if the federal government came out today and said, oh, by the way, we know the carbon tax has to get to $200. We're committed to achieving the Paris target. So we know it has to get to over $200 per ton of CO2. That's a big increase in the price of gasoline from where it would have been over the next 8 or 9 years. And we're committed to doing that to achieve our Paris target. They're not doing that. What they're saying is we're going to revise the clean fuel standard. We're going to revise a policy so that I'm hearing that when the coal plants are phased out, it isn't just going to be natural gas plants in those jurisdictions like Alberta and Saskatchewan. They're looking at possibly a vehicle emission standard like we have in British Columbia and Quebec. So what we're seeing is what we've seen in California. California has a cap and trade system and some pricing, and it's all regulations almost entirely that are driving reductions in California. And my question to you is, what do you and I care? Why do you care if it's a carbon price or a regulation?
Fair enough. I guess I just wonder about the moral problem of having this externality not priced. Like, it just seems, we know there's an externality there. We know it should be factored into accounting somewhere in the system, and yet we're not doing that. And would you just say that we do that just via regulations then?
Yeah, and the regulation is an implicit pricing of an externality. So when we got rid of ozone depleting substances, we didn't have a big fight about what price to set at them. We said, we got to phase this stuff out. Let's do it. When we did that with lead in gasoline, when we did it with sulfur in gasoline, there were a few sulfur pricing programs. Even the big one in the United States only did about 25% of the heavy lifting. It was done by regulation. In Ontario, we had a little bit of one. So we got rid of acid rain. We dealt with urban air pollution. We've dealt with ozone depleting substances, lead, the 12 toxins. All of these things we've done with regulation. I'm not promoting regulation. I'm just giving you the evidence. We didn't say, oh, for moral reasons, let's not, do this until we've put a price on it. We've said we have to stop doing this. And the price will be the fine that you pay as a refiner if you're still putting lead in gasoline, or you're still producing a gasoline that causes a lot of NOx or has sulfur in it. Here, you're going to jail, and that's the price. And so that's society's an environment. That's kind of 90% of what we've done since 1970.
Okay.